They say history does not whisper, it echoes. And sometimes the loudest echo comes from a single decision, a single moment, a single mistake that reshapes the destiny of nations. Tonight, imagine the crackling tension of a continent on fire. Imagine maps trembling under the weight of ambition. And imagine one man standing at the center of it all, believing himself unstoppable, until he made the mistake that would shatter his empire, his army, and ultimately, his dream of ruling the world. This is the story of Adolf Hitler's biggest mistake, the fatal miscalculation that changed world history forever. When we look back at the Second World War, we often imagine a vast chessboard of strategies, alliances, conspiracies, and battles fought on land, sea, and air. But what we forget is that wars are often decided not by weapons, but by judgments, by choices made in moments of arrogance or desperation. Hitler, a man obsessed with absolute control, believed he could shape the world with the force of his will. He believed Europe would bow before him, that nations would fall one after another like dominoes, and that his ideology would rise like an unchallenged empire. And for a time, it seemed as though he might succeed. By 1941, Hitler stood at what he believed was the peak of destiny. Germany had crushed Poland in weeks. Norway and Denmark had fallen like fragile doors kicked open by stormtroopers. Belgium and the Netherlands, countries Hitler once dismissed as insignificant, were now in his grip. And France, the mighty France, with centuries of military pride, had surrendered in a stunning 6 weeks. Even Britain, though undefeated, stood alone, battered, and isolated across the English Channel. This was the moment when Hitler believed himself invincible, and it is in moments of overconfidence that the seeds of destruction are planted. His generals urged caution. His advisors warned him. His own military intelligence whispered that the risks were too great. But Hitler believed he saw something others could not. He believed fate had chosen him. And so he prepared for a decision that would not just reshape the war, but rewrite the future of the world. The decision to invade the Soviet Union. Operation Barbarossa, launched on June 22, 1941, was not simply a military move. It was Hitler's ultimate gamble. A gamble driven by ideology, by obsession, and by the dangerous belief that the Soviet Union was nothing more than a giant made of clay. Hitler believed the Red Army would collapse in weeks. He believed the Soviet people would break. He believed winter was a myth, or at least something German soldiers could easily fight through. He believed victory was inevitable. But history has a cruel way of humbling the arrogant. When German tanks rolled across the Soviet frontier, they moved fast, so fast that even Hitler began to believe his own fantasies entirely. City after city fell. The Luftwaffe dominated the skies. The roads leading to Moscow seemed wide open, and by autumn, the world watched as Germany stood at the threshold of yet another triumph. Yet beneath the apparent success, cracks were beginning to form. Cracks Hitler refused to see. Germany's supply lines were overstretched. Ammunition, fuel, and food had to travel hundreds of miles through hostile territory. Soldiers, exhausted by months of marching, were fighting in uniforms meant for summer. Hitler ignored the warnings that winter was approaching. He insisted the Soviet Union would collapse before the snow fell, even though history had famously proven that the Russian winter was no ordinary adversary. But the biggest mistake was not winter. The biggest mistake was Hitler's catastrophic underestimation of the Soviet spirit. He expected fear. He found fury. He expected weakness. He found defiance. He expected surrender. He found a nation rising from the ashes of burning cities, fighting not just for land, but for survival. When winter finally struck, it struck with a vengeance. Temperatures plummeted to record lows. German engines froze in place. Tanks refused to start. Guns jammed. Soldiers wrapped their feet in newspapers to keep warm. horses died in the snow. And still Hitler refused retreat, refused flexibility, refused reason. His orders were absolute. No step backward. It was madness disguised as determination. The Soviet counteroffensive that winter smashed into the weakened German lines like a hammer. What had once been an unstoppable force was now a struggling, starving, freezing army trapped in a land it did not understand. The moment Moscow stood firm, the illusion of Hitler's invincibility shattered. The German army never fully recovered. From that moment onward, they were no longer advancing, they were surviving. But Hitler's mistake went deeper than military miscalculation. It reshaped the entire strategic landscape of the war. By opening the Eastern Front, Hitler forced Germany into a two-front war. The very scenario that military strategists had warned about for decades. A scenario that had crippled Germany in World War I. A scenario that no nation, no matter how powerful, could sustain. While millions of German troops were trapped in the vastness of Russia, the British regrouped. The Americans entered the war. The Allies gained precious time. Factories in the United States began producing weapons on a scale never seen before. Britain strengthened its air force and navy. And the Soviet Union, fueled by rage and determination, transformed into a war machine capable of replacing losses with shocking speed. Hitler's biggest mistake was not simply invading the Soviet Union. His biggest mistake was believing he could fight the world on his own terms. Believing ideology was stronger than geography. Believing fate would bend to his will. Believing that history favored him. This arrogance blinded him when he needed clarity. It isolated him when he needed diplomacy. It made him destroy the very alliances that could have strengthened Germany. Instead of treating the Soviet Union as a strategic partner, even temporarily, he treated it as an obstacle in his ideological crusade. He dismissed the warnings of his generals. He ignored the lessons of Napoleon. He underestimated the scale of the challenge. And in doing so, he pulled Germany into a war it could not win. Every empire in history has faced the weight of its own ambition. Rome stretched too far. Napoleon marched into Russia believing winter could not touch him, and Hitler followed the same doomed path. Operation Barbarossa was more than a military campaign. It was the breaking point where Hitler's vision collided with reality. But history's cruel irony is this: Hitler could have won in Europe if he had avoided this single mistake. Had he focused on Britain, or fortified his positions, or simply held back for a few more years, the map of the world might look very different today. But his obsession with conquering the East overpowered all strategic logic. As the Eastern Front devoured German troops, Hitler's paranoia grew. He no longer trusted his generals. He no longer listened to reason. He issued commands that defied military sense, insisting on holding positions that should have been abandoned, throwing men into battles they could not win, wasting resources on symbolic victories while the Soviet war machine grew stronger every month. The tide turned fully at Stalingrad, a brutal, unrelenting confrontation where entire divisions were erased, and where Hitler's command to fight to the last man led to one of the most devastating defeats in military history. The surrender of the German Sixth Army was a blow that echoed across the world. It was the moment the myth of Nazi invincibility died. From that point on, Hitler's empire began to collapse piece by piece. The Red Army pushed westward. The Allies liberated North Africa. Italy fell. D-Day opened another front. And still, Hitler refused to accept reality. Still, he believed he could reverse the tide. Still, he clung to the fantasy that history was on his side. But history does not wait for fantasies. It does not bend for dictators. It does not rewrite itself for comfort. Hitler's biggest mistake, invading the Soviet Union, did not only cost Germany the war. It cost millions of lives. It redrew borders. It created the Cold War landscape. It changed every future alliance, every future conflict, every future negotiation. it shaped the world we live in today. When the Third Reich finally collapsed in 1945, it was not destroyed by a single enemy, but by the chain reactions set off by that one catastrophic decision in 1941. A decision made by a leader drunk on triumph, blinded by ideology, and deaf to the warnings of others. And so, when we study history, we are reminded of a lesson as old as time. Empires do not fall when they are weak. They fall when they believe they are too strong to fail. Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union stands as the ultimate example of hubris, a reminder that even the most powerful can be undone by their own beliefs. Today, as we reflect on those years of chaos, suffering, and resistance, we must remember the truth that history teaches us. One decision can topple a regime, rewrite borders, and shape the destiny of generations. One mistake, made by one man at the height of his power, can change the world forever. And Hitler's greatest mistake did exactly that.